Hi everyone, this is Cloud Dragon FinOps podcast, episode number 2, in which I'm going to talk about the most effective way to save money on AWS. I found this way a long time ago. I've used that for a long time ago, but only recently I realized how effective it was. I tried to analyze my efforts for the last few years and break down them, by the tools I used. And I found out that most of the time I've spent on optimizing architecture, trying to convince developers to downscale, talking with management about cost saving in general. All those efforts produced just 1/3 of the cost saving, and 2/3 were produced just by monitoring cost increases and notifying teams about them. What could be simpler than that? Here's an example tool that I've built for this podcast to demonstrate what cost monitoring is, and to demonstrate that it is super easy to set up and work with. You just have a page with all the cost increases that happened just recently, and you see them, you validate if they're expected or not, how definite they look. For example, this one may not look like a cost increase, maybe it's just a spike. But this one is definitely a cost increase, and I could notify teams about, hey guys, there is a cost increase. Is it expected or not? And this really simple process produces tremendous results. And when we will go through the process, you will understand why that happens. When a cost increase happens, teams are already, they did something to create a cost increase. They released a software, new version, they enabled tracing logs or anything that, anything that was produced during productive work of developers may produce a cost increase, unexpected one. So when the cost increase happens, I just notify teams. I don't blame them. I don't say, hey guys, why there is a cost increase, etc. No, I just say, is it expected or not? And in many cases, it's not expected. In many cases, developers are concentrated on building infrastructure, features, solutions, and they are not that concerned about AWS costs. They don't have to be expert in AWS costs to create software. So when they see that there is a cost increase that they didn't expect, they are willing to fix that and they are willing to adjust. And what I need to do is just sit here and verify that the costs go down after some time. And if it doesn't go after some time, it means developers forgot about this or they postponed the fix. I just need to circle back and talk with them. Hey guys, you had this increase. It wasn't fixed. Is everything good? Should I notify you again? Like maybe you forgot about this, etc. And when they fix the cost increase, I usually give them all the credit because they did all the work. I did nothing. I just saw a chart and made a screenshot of the chart like this. I just say, hey, this is this is cost increase. Would you mind if is it expected or not? And they did all the work, so I don't need to get any credit. I just say, hey guys, you're cool. Great work. And it's really cool for them because the issues are identified fast. You don't have to convince developers to change architecture, and they don't have to do a context switch to fix that. But compare that to a situation where they made a cost increase and we notify them not like 2 days later, but two months later, and they forgot what they did at that time. They forgot what the product was, what was released, and somebody is already using this service already. Like they can't just roll back it because there is an API dependency. It's already in production, etc., etc. And you also have to convince them to fix that because this is already a solution that worked for 2 months. If it doesn't break, don't touch it. So it's completely different perspective when you come to developers like 2 months later after the product was deployed, rather than 2 days later, because 2 days later sounds like a bug and they're completely looking forward into fixing that. And this effect, I would say, if you compare this to a conventional cost optimization that happens in a certain ways when management sees a great cost increase and they just decide that this sprint we will do the cost optimizations, let's get together and find out how we could reduce the cost. Or they buy a FinOps tool, or they try to hire developers or do something to reduce the costs, or try to switch vendors. If we compare these conventional cost optimizations attempts or approaches to this cost increase monitoring, it's not, if here we tell when we want to save costs. Here costs tell us when we should save them. So we addressing issues quickly and in time, and we do it like every day. It's kind of a routine practice, day-to-day cost fixing. And this all this kind of makes this cost increase super effective compared to everything else. It supports all the services. It's not like savings plans that work only for EC2 or some scanners for inefficiencies that work only for a few types of resources. We could monitor all the costs. You could monitor AWS, Google Cloud, Marketplace. You could even integrate vendors if vendors give you monthly or daily cost reports for, we could group them. For example, you use some external logging vendor to store and process your logs. You could just build a chart that will construct your daily log ingestion volumes per some team, for example. And you can also notify teams about log ingestion increases. So this method is kind of very versatile and it's kind of abstract, and you could apply it to any costs that your company is using. All operation costs could be kind of handled by that. It's just for cloud costs, cloud operational costs. They are created not by, today we will spend like, it's not budgeted. These costs are not budgeted. They are just created by developers. That's why you have to monitor them. You can't plan for those operational costs in advance. You just monitor them and react to them. And this tool is very simple to implement. You don't need to buy software. You don't need to buy some software from vendors. You don't need to hire anyone to work with the software or configure it. Anyone could do that because it's not hard to take a look at the chart and notify a team. What could be simpler than that? You don't even need to have too much technical knowledge into doing that, because all the technical problems are handled by developers. They analyze the issue, they tell if it's expected or not, and they decide if it has to be fixed or not. So they take all the responsibilities, they make all the actions, and we just notifying them. So this is very easy because this process could be executed by a person who is not into AWS costs or into software development in general. And all these fixes are done in a few days, in a few weeks. We get a cost increase, we schedule a fix for that, and it's done. But if we are using conventional cost optimization techniques, we could fix something that was there for years. So we react afterwards. So this conventional cost optimization is very good. If you never did cost optimization in your company, you never were concerned about costs, and now you are, that's a time when you could hire someone or you could buy a software to analyze your infrastructure and optimize it. But in the long run, you can't do it every day. You can do it every month. You cannot do it every year. It's still not effective. You have to make sure that you're just not creating unexpected cost increases and you're not paying for what you don't want to pay. It's not just a short-term effect. It has long-term effects too. Like if you are a growing company, and I'm currently working in a growing company, and our AWS costs grow. And what we don't want to see is unpredictable growth of the costs, because nobody likes that. No manager, no investor likes the unpredictable cost increases in AWS, because it's not clear where this cost would be in a 5-10 years. Like, you can't even calculate that, because if this growth is like exponential, it could be anything in a 5-10 years. It could be 10 million. Because this growth, if it doesn't stop, it could reach the sky. So you don't know where it stops. But when you monitor cost increases, and you know that all increases that happen in AWS account are expected, this makes the AWS cost predictable. Because you know, you launch the product, you get a cost increase. You create a release, it has a cost increase. Great, no problem, we expected that. And it's not just a medium term, it's also the long-term effects that are the most important in the cost increase monitoring. This feedback that we give to developers helps them to learn about cost saving in general. They start to be aware that the software development is not just about features and the software and architecture. It's also about costs. And they learn that practically. It's not like we put them in a class and say, hey, this is how you should optimize your instances. No, that's not how it works. We just give them a feedback. We back them up. We make sure that they are allowed to make mistakes, and they just have to correct for that. So if they don't have to think about AWS costs all the time. Like, imagine I've put developers in a class and tell them, hey, you should need to make sure that all your AWS costs are tight. What's going to happen? They were gonna spend like 30%, 50% of their time talking about cost effectiveness of their software solutions, of their architecture, of the infrastructure. This is not productive. What we want to make is to give them complete freedom of creating whatever they want on AWS. They could do whatever they want, but if there is a cost increase, they just have to fix that. It's much more effective from the business standpoint, and it's much more, pleasurable for developers to work like that, because they have this freedom of working in a cloud. I saw a few times when the costs go uncontrollably up, management gets really concerned about the costs and starts to push on developers, saying, hey, we don't need to spend money there. Now we will go through some process to allocate resources. You can't just create instance, you have to create it in a certain way, you have to do this, you have to do that. So it's all interference within kind of development field. You're interfering with the way developers work. Instead, we're just allowing them do whatever they want and learn by themselves and improve all solutions that they provide, because their time is also kind of costly. If we try to force them to save money on AWS, their time is also incredibly expensive. Developers are super expensive. So they kind of spend minimal time on these cost-saving activities, which is cost-effective for the company. And also, because they learn all the ways you could waste money on AWS and how this AWS cost how the charging process works, what services are cheap, what services are expensive. Developers learn how to cut corners. They could say, oh, we are not going to use any servers. We will just use some open source solution for logging, for example. Or they will say, let's put just everything on one server in QA, because who cares? It's QA. We don't need to invent, some multi-AZ, multi-region solution and put this into QA environment. So they learn a lot of ways how they could make their work more effective, because they know what the AWS cloud it is. If the developer doesn't know what is expensive and what is cheap, he might try to save CPU cycles or RAM or storage, and he will just doing this over engineering, trying to save money that nobody cares about, like some CPU cycles, who cares about them? Unless you're working in some high load environment, you could just throw hardware at the problem and let computer just run, because that's what computer is supposed to do. Execute the software. You don't have to optimize everything for him. So if you provide developers with a feedback, it makes them really smart and effective. And if you don't do that, well, then you have a problem, because you have a developer in a company that constantly producing suboptimal solutions, and he doesn't give it a feedback to learn from that. If he doesn't get a feedback that all this super cool technology, all these super cool architectures that are using like hundreds of lambdas, hundreds of queues, hundreds of AWS services are not good, like they are not optimal. When the developer doesn't get this feedback, he will continue to work in your company uneducated about AWS costs, and he will continue to cost you more and more as the time goes on, because these cost inefficiencies produced by a person who is not concerned about AWS costs are going to snowball really, really fast. So you want to make sure that you provide a feedback to developers about the performance on AWS, because they learn very fast, and within a few months they will adjust and they will no longer produce same mistakes they were producing previously. All of this technique of cost increase monitoring is super effective for all reasons I've already described. It works on many levels. You don't have to risk with infrastructure or production. You don't have to commit to anything. You just sit here and monitor cost increases. You don't have to invest too much time in that. It's just 5 minutes a day. I think every company should have that, because it's so easy, and it's like there is almost zero impact on the organization at all. Like it's not some burden, it's not some tagging, it's not some commitment with other vendor. You just monitor your cost increases. What could be, what could be simpler than that? The only problem is that you cannot do it by yourself. You can't just go in Cost Explorer and look at the total cost chart and see the cost increases. It's not possible because there are huge amount of resources there. Like it may work for a small company, but as soon as you hit like 100K a year or something similar to that, you no longer can monitor your costs manually. It's just too much work. Even if you group the costs by whatever grouping you want and try in the hope that you will find some cool charts that increases and you could see that, it doesn't work like that, because a Cost Explorer just shows you top 5 cost categories, and then it shows everything else in other category, and you have to go through the CSVs and do all this crazy work. Instead, you should make software work like that, and the software will scan all these costs and present you a beautiful chart saying that here's the smallest possible category of the costs, and this is how much it increases over time. And if you compare this chart where the increase was 2% and this chart where the increase is like 200%, even though this is the same number, this chart is much more informative than this one. And if you want to do this tool yourself to monitor this cost, it's super simple. You just get the cost from Cost Explorer, you compare last 7 days with the previous 7 days, and you get the cost increase number, which you could relate to. You could open this category in Cost Explorer and see the chart. But if you don't want to do this manual stuff, I've built a tool specifically for this podcast episode. I've asked my little sister to draw a few great illustrations here, so that you could get here, you could sign up for the service, you could sign up after you sign up, you go to the settings, set up what kind of cost increases you want to record, and you add AWS accounts you want to monitor. Once you add AWS account, this tool will scan the last 90 days of the cost increases, and it will also scan your account daily for additional cost increases that happen. All the cost increases are listed here. You could write comments to them, to remember what this cost increase is about. You could get some history of the cost increases. You get, change the statuses, whatever. And there is a link to Cost Explorer if you want to validate that this is not just a software bug, but it's an actual cost increase that you could see on AWS and show the screenshot of it. So I really encourage you to use this tool. It's free. It's always going to be free. I don't have any financial incentives here. My goal is to make FinOps more. My goal is to make sure that the companies use the infrastructure effectively. They're not paying for what they don't want. It's appalling how much money are wasted on cloud services just by pure not doing simple cost saving or cost monitoring like this. So I just decided to build a simple tool so everyone could get and save like 2/3 of the possible cost savings, like I did. I was surprised how effective the tool was. I really want everyone to be lean on the AWS costs. And my interest in building and supporting this tool is that I want to see what kind of services people use. I want to get some statistics. And if you want to share your AWS costs for statistical purposes, you could enable this flag during registration or in the settings. So I would know that I could use your AWS costs to draw some statistical information from that. So I could, say this is how much people spent on this service, and this is how much people spent on the other service. If you have any suggestions or you have troubles with the tool, you could reach me out through this email, or maybe you want to get professional FinOps services. You want me to look into your AWS account and check out what we could save. That's also possible. Again, you just contact me through this email. That's all I have for this episode. I would probably sit here on this slide. I just want to conclude that cost increase monitoring is a super effective and super simple tool that you could implement. And the earlier you implement that, the more effective it's going to be. It's just imbalanced tool. If compared to everything else, it's just pure beast. That's all I have for today. I hope this episode was interesting to you. Have a good time and see you in the future episodes. Bye.